online lectures here in world history. Today we are going to kick off our unit on classical Greece. We're going to always start where we always start, and that's with the geography. We'll talk about some of the early culture of the Greeks and maybe where some of that culture came from. I will tell you, embedded in this video are several pictures from my trip to Greece. If you are not interested in seeing those, or you don't have me for a teacher, feel free to skip right through those. But if you want to hear some stories on some cool places I've been to Greece, you can certainly check them out. So just giving you that heads up here. So we have one constructive response question we're going to seek to answer from today's story. It says, identify ways the geography of Greece helped shape Greek culture. There's no doubt that the geography of Greece is a little bit different than some of the other civilizations we've studied. And it's because of that geography that their culture is different. So we're just going to see how the geography has shaped who they are and how they live. So we'll give several examples that we can use to answer this question. So the three things we're going to look at here today, we'll look at Greek geography, then we'll cover the early cultures that influenced the Greeks. And we're going to really quickly go through the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, the Phoenicians, and the Dorians. Most civilizations at this point in time, as we move further in history, are not original. They borrow from other cultures. That's a normal thing. We still do this today. So we're going to look at the cultures that essentially the Greeks borrowed from as their culture developed. And then we'll talk about that culture. We'll look at early Greek culture, some things that are very significant about the Greek people. So on my trip to Greece, I learned a few Greek phrases. This would be modern day Greek, but the ancient Greeks may have said these things as well. So if you want to say good morning to someone, you say kalimera. Kalimera means good morning. Where kalispera means good afternoon, or it can mean good evening. So kalimera means good morning, kalispera means good night. If you want to say thank you, that's efkaristo. Efkaristo. Parakala means please, and you're welcome. All right, so where is Greece? Well, Greece is in the southern part of Europe. You can see it right here on this map. It juts out into the Mediterranean Sea, but the Mediterranean Sea is not the only water that the Greeks had access to, and that's going to be a big part of how their geography shapes their culture. So let's set the stage. The geography of the ancient Greeks was considerably different than the previous cultures we have studied. Up to this point, we have studied the people in Sumer, or Mesopotamia. We've talked about Egypt. We've talked about India. We've talked about China. And the one thing all of those civilizations had in common were river systems. We looked at river systems in all of those units. We're not going to look at river systems here with the Greeks, but we are going to talk about water, in this case, bodies of water that surround the Greek peninsula. So we also mentioned that we're going to talk about several cultures that influenced the Greeks. So the culture of the ancient Greeks was shaped by several different groups: the Minoans, the Mycenaeans, the Phoenicians, and the Dorians. And we're going to just take a real quick snapshot look at each one of those. We're not going to spend a ton of time on them, but again, as I mentioned earlier, these are the groups that the Greeks borrowed from in order to create their culture. So, ancient Greece. Ancient Greece really had some advantages that are going to make for this to be a really great place to have a civilization. It's got warm weather, you've got access to water, not maybe the best for farmland, and maybe not the best for trade, but weather really does help civilizations thrive. It is a warm place pretty much year-round. So what you see on this map, everything in that light tan color, really represents what will become Greek areas. You can see it pretty much surrounds three different bodies of water: the Ionian Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea. So let's dive deeper into that geography part and how geography shapes Greek life. Ancient Greece mostly consisted of a mountainous peninsula jutting out into the Mediterranean Sea. So it's very hilly, it's very rocky, but it's gorgeous. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. I had a couple of hotel rooms where I opened up my window and I was just staring at a mountainside, and it was really, really cool. But of course that poses some logistical challenges when it comes to setting up a civilization, especially for travel and for agriculture. There are over 2,000 islands that jut out into the Aegean and Ionian seas as well. So lots of different islands. Many of those are very, very beautiful. So the sea was to Greece what rivers were to Egypt and Mesopotamia. Now there are some rivers in Greece, but not any major ones like the ones we've looked at with the Nile or the Tigris and Euphrates in these two areas. So it was said that the Greeks did not live on the land, but they lived around the sea. And I think that phrase really does sum up the Greeks quite a bit. Because of that, the Greeks became master shipbuilders due to sea trade. They were very, very good at building ships, especially ships for warfare, which we saw in engineering empire called triremes, and we'll look at those a little bit later in this story. But ships for trade were a big part of what they created as well. So here's just another map. On your notes sheet, you have a little map embedded in your on your sheet that has 3 different blanks on it. I would like you to fill in the Ionian Sea to the west, the Aegean Sea to the east, and sorry about this cover up there, the Mediterranean Sea to the south. There's water everywhere. So the Greeks took advantage of that. Again, they became shipbuilders because of it. So go ahead and fill in those 3 seas so you have that on your notes packet. Continuing on with the geography here, Greece lacked natural resources such as extensive farmland, lots of timber, and precious metals. As I've said in other videos, there is no perfect place on the planet. There's no one region that has everything humanity has ever needed. And so humans have certainly made rough situations work, and they've adapted to what they have. The Greeks are no different. Rugged mountains cover 3/4 of ancient Greece. Like I said, many of them are just absolutely beautiful. It's very green, it's very hilly there. And so the mountains divided up Greece into several different territories, and it really shaped Greek political life. Uneven terrain made travel difficult. What that's really going to do is it's going to make it difficult for the Greeks to unite. They're never going to have a united empire with one ruler controlling Greece. What they're going to have instead, and we're going to cover this in a little bit, are independent city-states. They may trade with one another, they may interact with one another, but they were never ruled jointly or together. And that's really all because of geography. That is definitely a way that geography shaped Greek life. Large-scale irrigation was not possible. It's difficult to bring water uphill, so you didn't have big farms. You didn't have big populations because of that. So the land could not sustain a large population. So a lot of these city-states of Greece, as significant as they are in history, were not huge because they couldn't be. There was just not enough food to sustain a large population. Mentioned the climate earlier. The climate varied from 48 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter to 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. I mean, that's compared to Minnesota where we are, that's a pretty fantastic year-round temperature. It's very nice in Greece year-round. All right, the second part of this, after the geography, is to really look at the groups that influenced the Greeks. And I told you we're going to go through this fairly quickly. But the first group we're going to mention is the Minoans. The Minoans really inhabited the island of Greece. And you can see it here. It's south of the Greek mainland. It's going to have a good climate. The people there are going to be able to enjoy outdoor activities. And they're one of the first groups that will influence the Greek culture. So the Minoans, they were outdoorsy, they were athletic, and they gave the Greeks architecture and burial customs. And I have a couple of images here that are synonymous with Greece, and that is the Olympic Games. The Minoans didn't invent the Olympic Games, but they had outdoor activities that will eventually the Greeks will use and shape into some of the events that will be competed in the first Olympics. So outdoor activities were a part of the Minoans. The Greeks just borrowed that. The second group is called the Phoenicians. Now, here again is Greece, but if we go all the way to the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea, we get Phoenicia, where the Phoenicians live. So let's briefly talk about them. What really the Phoenicians give the world, not only the Greeks, but they give the world the phonetic alphabet. And the phonetic alphabet really becomes the alphabet that we use today. And I'll show you this on the next slide. So that it's going to transform the Greek language as well as many other languages after that. The other thing that the Phoenicians are well known for is shipbuilding. They definitely influenced Greek shipbuilding, and they were really good at traveling all over the Mediterranean Sea, as you can see from this map. They were able to travel to all sorts of different locations, even making it to the Atlantic Ocean out in the west. And you really can't do that unless you have good shipping technology. So the Phoenicians were very good at building ships. Here is the alphabet. So what you see here is the Phoenician alphabet, and you and I very likely can't read that unless you're much smarter than I am. But you'll see that the Greeks kind of took it and they just changed it a little bit. Some of these symbols look very similar to what the Phoenicians had. And as you move kind of down the list, you can see how it slowly develops into what we use as the English version, A, B, C, D, and so forth. So it is very much based, our language is very much based on what the Phoenicians gave us. All right, that's going to bring us to the end of part 1. So go ahead and pause, and then go ahead and queue up part 2. And in part 2, we're going to look a little bit more at those early cultures, and then we'll talk specifically about Greek culture. So you can go ahead and stop it there.